So, do you have any experiences that you have felt like line up with those words, "You've got me touching heaven"? Have you had moments of awakening, moments of total peace, bliss, harmony, where you feel like you are in a heaven state of consciousness? We are on the last Sunday of our deep dive into the adventure of spirituality. And we are using the book, if it's your first Sunday, and our last of the series, that's okay. We're using the book by Jeff Foster called The Deepest Acceptance, Radical Awakening in Ordinary Life. So this Sunday, the conversation revolves around the search for spiritual enlightenment, the search for awakening. And I was actually thinking as I was exploring this and looking through the reading and looking at the conversation today, I was thinking about it, and I'm open to hearing pieces where you've seen this that I haven't, but I haven't seen a lot from Charles and Myrtle talking about like enlightenment, like this is what we're seeking, enlightenment. They did a lot of exploring and discussing of deep peace, a deep experience of wholeness and how to live in that wholeness and abundance, no matter what the visual was or the outer experience. And then they did a lot of diving into and unfolding your inner wholeness, your health, your true wellness. And I think to the Fillmores that peace and wholeness, like being able to walk in peace, being able to experience one's wholeness and practice these powerful principles was the spiritual awakening, was the spiritual path. But a lot of times today we hear the words enlightenment. We hear about awakening and enlightenment, and those words are more common today. And so today is a little bit about exploring what that is. I had the sacred honor to do a memorial service this weekend for a beloved, and it was an incredible service where you got to hear a lot about her through her writings and her poetry and the sharing of the family members. And what I learned was that she had a spiritual exploration kind of through her whole life. And one of the things that struck me about the service was the chaplain, the prayer chaplain at this living space. And the prayer chaplain talked about the honor he has to get to see people in the latter parts of their lives, the last part of their lives. And as he was talking about what an honor it was, he said he also gets to be very present to how their spirituality or religion fits them throughout their lifetime. So whether or not at the end of life, someone's religion or spirituality or spiritual practice actually fits them, like fits and feeds them, or whether or not it doesn't really stand the test of time and the test of different experiences, right? Whether it kind of crumbles and falls apart. And another piece of the sharing in this sacred service was someone sharing that this woman said that, and I forget the rest of the conversation, but it was something about being in the different weather, being in sunshine all the time, like places where it's just always great weather, or places where you have the seasons. And she said that the seasons make you strong. The seasons make you strong. And I liked that. But those two things coming together, how does our spiritual practice fit us in the variety of seasons of life? Because though on planet Earth we can move to Costa Rica or we can move to California and we can be in a place that is pretty sunshiny most of the time, in the human condition we cannot avoid the seasons of life. At least I haven't seen it done. So it's a good question to ask ourselves. Does your spirituality fit you? How has it matured over time? And does it have the capacity to serve? So let's ask ourselves today, how is yours serving you? Can it serve you through the ups and downs and the ins and outs, Does it promise to be true to you in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, until death do you part? Does it have you? Does it hold you, for better and for worse? We're here not to have stagnant spirituality. Spirituality, I believe, is meant to evolve and mature. It is meant to deepen and to deepen us. No one thing will fit everyone, but when we give ourselves permission to explore, permission to truly know ourselves, permission to try things on, true religion will invite us home to our deepest selves. And as Jeff Foster says, to the deepest acceptance of our true nature. The deepest acceptance. So we've been exploring this book by Jeff Foster, who's not a Unity author. We take a book each fall and we explore it. And we explore these concepts and these ideas, these writings and these practices, not to throw out something that's already working or something that fits us. And not because an author is right or someone else is somehow wrong, but because we are on an adventure. And it's good to be on an adventure in spirituality. Because sometimes when we don't talk about those things, when we don't open up the floodgates or the doors to a practice, when we don't try on new things, we don't always realize that something doesn't fit anymore, or that we may have gotten something on one level, right? But there was a whole nother level waiting to be unfolded or uncovered. That with just a subtlety of someone else's voice or a simple practice, it could transform what we thought was simple or what we thought we were practicing in a way that was feeding us or serving. And we can realize, oh, wait, this is what it means, or this is what it feels like when I embody that, when I experience that. It's important to continue growing, is it not? So in Unity, we often focus on the positivity, and we focus on our minds, and our thoughts, our prayers, and our thoughts actually create our reality and create our perception and perspective. And if that is deeply balanced with the acceptance of self and life and awareness, body awareness, mind awareness, emotional awareness, if it is balanced with that, it is an incredibly powerful path that continues to evolve, I think, throughout all the stages of life. I have seen it serve people throughout entire lifetimes. But sometimes, if we don't develop the skill sets or the depth of the practice or the depth of the awareness, even in Unity, we can have a tendency to let our spiritual practice lead us into avoiding things, avoiding people, avoiding circumstances, avoiding feelings, avoiding self, avoiding concepts that challenge us. We can tend to sugarcoat things or ride the posse train all the way to, I don't know, the zoo. We can just stay up here like, I have gotten this part of the practice and it served me maybe at that moment of awakening. Maybe at that moment I realized I'm touching heaven, right? I realized before I was like swimming in hell, and then there was a moment where I was touching heaven because I got this about the power of positivity and the power of our positive thinking. And then in an attempt to grab onto that, to hold onto that so strongly, we just got on that posse train and we were like, I won't say anything else. I won't think anything else. I will just be up here. I will just be up here all the time, all the way to the zoo. Then lock me up in happy camp. Because all I can do is think about those positive things, because it did save me. I get it. It transformed me. But what happens when the other things come up, as they may? We can instead reject them. We can instead stifle ourselves. We can instead criticize and even hate the one that has other experiences that don't line up with that practice or that philosophy. We can feel less than, we can feel like we're not enough, and it doesn't take long, does it, for us to induce self-harm because we're not reaching the bar. And does that serve us? Does that serve when we do that? Or is that just still the old paradigm of a heaven and a hell, a devil and a God, good and a bad, the fall from the garden? I'm going to share with you a couple of passages from the reading this week. Jeff Foster says this, perhaps, and he goes on to say, the wholeness we seek is already here, actually hidden in our humanness, hidden in everything we're trying to escape. Perhaps being human was never a problem. Perhaps life was never the problem. Perhaps we don't need solutions to the non-existent problem of being alive here and now. Perhaps we don't need promises of a better world, an afterlife, a heaven, a transcendent spiritual realm, and never did. Perhaps we're deeply okay as we are, already imperfect in our imperfection, already fully embraced by the very life we are trying to avoid. He says, we've been led to believe that humanity is in some kind of fallen state. A fallen state. Charles and Myrtle talked about this when they did the metaphysics of the Garden of Eden. It was more about waking up to duality than it was about waking up to seeing you're a wretch, or that you're somehow wrong, there's something wrong with you. They pointed us back to the teaching that metaphysically this waking up to see that you have no clothes on, this waking up to seeing the differences, you're just like the work of Ken Wilber going into lines and boundaries. He's a transpersonal psychologist that did a lot of work and recognizing that when we have awareness, we could see something as a line. A line is just having awareness. A line is waking up in the garden and going, oh, you're over there and I'm over here. We're not the same person anymore. A boundary is saying that's a problem. A boundary is not being able to see that even though we're in separate bodies, we are still the same cosmic self, that we are still unified, we are still unity. And so we tend to sometimes, with a spiritual practice, start segmenting ourselves, separating ourselves. And anytime we do this, it just fits into the same paradigm. It doesn't matter what religion we're practicing it in. It doesn't matter if it's our inner work or the outer world. But we're engaging in a pattern and a paradigm where we believe in a fallen state. I believe that Charles and Myrtle, in order to experience and express the healings that they did, in order to really get the wholeness and to be able to practice principle and bring it to the world in which they were living, which were very interesting times where money struggles were rampant, times where they had to dive into their creativity, but they could still believe in a realm of infinite possibility. They still believed in abundance because I believe they knew their wholeness at a core level so deeply that the outer vision could not challenge that. Because they worked these principles and they worked this practice so deeply. Jeff Foster also says this. He says, experiencing ourselves as separate individuals, tearing reality into two, we believed that if we could get rid of these dark aspects of our experience, if we could defeat the devil, if we could overcome sin, if we could rid the world of evil, if we could destroy impurity, then we would live longer and prosper. In our pursuit of heaven, we created and then went to war with our idea of hell. In our pursuit of heaven, we created and then went to war with our idea of hell. He says, in our pursuit of nirvana, we rejected samsara. In our pursuit of mental health, we waged war on what we call mental illness. In our pursuit of God, we waged war with sin. So the invitation from Jeff Foster is truly to give up the war. that enlightenment and awakening is not about controlling every little thought. It's not about controlling every outer circumstance. It's about an inner awakening to recognize that there is no need to have a battle going on constantly, that there is no need to have a war, that in fact there is a safety and a security that can be known and can be felt inside, that has the capacity to presence all of it without continually being emotionally triggered or exporting our power to be manipulated by the constant flow of thoughts and circumstances and conditions. Now, if you go into that idea of our thoughts and our minds and their co-creative ability, a lot of times in unity we say, oh, well, we can control that because that's what we practice. We practice controlling it. But if we look at science, we look at these scientific explorations of the mind and thought, and we find in science that thought is mostly automatic. A huge percentage of thoughts are just uncontrollable happenings. And in fact, most of them are negative. Did you know that? That a majority of thoughts are negative. Some studies say even up to 80% of thoughts are naturally negative. And the human brain, the average human brain, has between 12,000 and 60,000 thoughts per day. And as many as 90 to 98% of those thoughts are repetitive or even the exact same thought from the day before. Thought control. Now, who wants to spend their time trying to work with those numbers? I'm already tired. So I don't think it's so much about going, ooh, there's that thought. Let me wrestle it. It's a wild cat. Let me get that one in a cage. Let me put that one back in the zoo. Let me lock that one up. Let me do this. Let me send that one to my grandma's. Let me send that one to my mother. Go back to where you came from. It's not so much about that, is it? The deeper practice is that our thoughts actually come from, because so much of it's automatic, right? Our thoughts actually come from this network of a belief system. And herein lies the key. Belief systems are more fluid. Belief systems can be shifted. If we have a very, very, very deep belief at the core of ourselves that we are safe, that we live in an infinite universe of love, that love is the presiding factor in this field we live in, if that is the deep belief, then the thoughts that spring up will start to be more aligned with that belief. And the ones that aren't can simply be there in the space without being a threat. They can be questioned. Is that true? It's interesting, but I might not believe it's true. Some spiritual teachers even say if you want to know what you believe, look at what you're thinking. If you want to know what you're thinking, you can't go the other way. So can we take the invitation to allow ourselves to stop trying so hard to control everything, stop applying any practice that creates a war or a battle within ourselves, and that's going to be different for each of us, right? And only we, through practice, it can't be done by reading, it can't be done in the head, it can only be done by tuning into the body. When we think something or we feel something or we read something or we're experiencing something, to just breathe into the sensations, breathe into inner awareness, and just ask ourselves, am I feeling peace right now? Or am I feeling conflict? And just dive into that, start following that, and find out where the war is. Find out what's caged up, what's being rejected, and just start breathing into that, not to manipulate it, but to allow what's already there to be there and to become the awareness that has the capacity to presence it with non-judgment and with radical compassion. so that we can embrace our divinity and the moments we're touching heaven, and also embrace our humanity and let that boundary that is often a boundary, it's often a wall that we want to stay on one side of, let that wall become a line. It's just a line. Jeff Foster says, life heals itself through you. Life heals itself through you. We can either, on this journey, try to create a bubble of seclusion where nothing can harm us, right? Where we have everything so set, either in our own selves or externally, that we live in our own utopia. Or we can actually nurture and foster the spiritual condition that can hold and be the space for all of life, for all of it, that knows that even in the midst of every experience, we don't have to be pulled by it and pushed by it. We can simply presence it all. We can simply be aware, and that maybe, just maybe, that's a key to awakening and enlightenment. Jeff Foster invites us into looking at our lives as an invitation. He says, look at your life. The invitation is everywhere. It's in the joy and in the pain, in the boredom and in the excitement, in the grief and in the ecstasy, in the sweetness and in the bitterness, at your birth and on your deathbed. The invitation is here in every single moment of this precious, fragile gift of a life we so easily take for granted. On enlightenment, he says, enlightenment has nothing to do with being so strong that you are able to accept all the waves, and the waves are those experiences, those thoughts. It's not about controlling the waves in every way, in any way. It's not about escaping the present moment. It's not about holding up an image of yourself as an enlightened person or proving how spiritual, blissed out, and peaceful you are all the time. It's about discovering who you are, which is so radically open, so vulnerable, so unprotected, so weak in a sense that it becomes more and more impossible for you to escape the waves appearing now. And this weakness isn't really weakness at all, for in this weakness is the greatest strength. It is the deepest acceptance of life. And you don't have to do this acceptance. It is how you are built. You don't have to do it. It is how you are built. I do believe that the Fillmores knew that. So are we willing to take on the invitation to allow this deep dive, this adventure in spirituality to continue unfolding for us as a practice, to take the nuggets and the pieces and the parts that might lift some old ways and let go of some parts of the practice that didn't fit, and actually deepen and expand our experience of ourselves in peace and with awakening. Foster says, here is the beautiful paradox of spiritual awakening. Life is already complete, radically complete, here and now. There is nothing wrong with you. Even in your imperfection, you are perfect exactly as you are. Life has already completed itself, and in and as this moment. And this is the beautiful ultimate truth of existence. And yet, equally, that completeness continues to express itself as a never-ending invitation to rediscover completeness in the midst of this embodied, personal, deeply human experience here and now. Namaste.